Hello my friends, welcome back to another painting tutorial. This week I'm going to paint a lovely little sunset seascape. Just to mix it up a bit again, lots of colourful paintings, summer's here, let's get some colour on the canvas. So a nice sunset seascape. I have a very wide canvas here, it's around 30 inches by 10. Very wide, very narrow. If you can't get these anywhere, if you want to paint in the similar size of this, what I would do is just get a normal big canvas and cut the canvas down, cut the frame with a little handsaw or something, cut it down to size if you really want to get something like this nice and wide, because they're very difficult to find. I pick these up sometimes in Aldi and Lidl's. They're very economical, very cheap, but they're very good canvases. But they only come in certain sizes sometimes. So it's very difficult to find these sizes online. So what I would do if I really wanted to paint something like this and I didn't have the canvas, I would take a normal big rectangular canvas and just measure and cut it in half even, make a nice wide, narrow canvas. That's what I would do. And just fold the canvas back around, staple it on, and it'll be good to go, if you really want to. But yeah, my palette is ready. I have lovely colours on the palette. Let's go and have some fun with this. Nice colourful landscapes. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you really like this video. I really do. Sunsets. Let's paint some sunsets. Don't go anywhere. Okay, my friends, let's go. Let's have some fun. There's a reference photograph. Isn't that just gorgeous? Nice. Now, look, there's not a lot going on in this, but a lot of colour, a lot of practice with paints and mixing and getting nice vibrant colours. So it's really a tutorial just to help you develop your skills with sunsets. That's really all it is. My main focus here is going to be the sky. I really want to take my time with the sky. The bottom half of the painting is fairly basic and simple. You may think it looks very complicated with lots of rocks and all that kind of thing, but we can actually make this quite simple. If we can get a really nice sky, that's 90% of the painting finished. Okay, so let's just concentrate, maybe part one, let's concentrate on a nice sky and take our time. I'll tell you what colours I have on my palette. Now, they're pretty much the same colours I have for every painting, okay? I just use the same colours for every painting. These are my basic colours which I use on my palette, all right? Every time, almost every single time. Titanium white, Naples yellow, phaylo blue, cadmium yellow pale, burnt sienna, magenta, lamp black, burnt umber, and cadmium red. And that will give us any range of colour we like, whatever we want to mix. So I'm going to start with the very bright spot in the middle. Let's just get that bright spot out of the way. And then we can work our colours into that gently. Does that make sense? So I'm going to take a big brush, any big flattish kind of a brush you have. This is very worn, it's a very old brush, very cheap brush, soft synthetic brush. I have some thinners here, which is turpentine with a little linseed oil in it, just to help us along with oiling the canvas and that kind of thing. I don't think I need to oil this very much, because if I was painting a very large sky with lots of blue, we'd say, for example, I would oil it. But we have lots of different shades mixing together, so I'm going to be changing colours as I go. So there's no need really to oil this or, you know, give it some thinners or anything like that. Let's just dampen our brushes. Dip that right into your thinners, give it a quick dab on the tissue to take off the excess. And let's go right into the cadmium yellow and a little cadmium red. Now these colours are very translucent and very transparent. And what I mean by that is, if you take a colour like burnt umber or Naples yellow, they're very thick pasty colours. They have a lot of kind of fillers in them, so they cover really well. Whereas the vibrant colours like cadmium yellow and cadmium red and even burnt sienna, they're very transparent colours. So you would probably need to mix a little white into this just to thicken it slightly, okay? And that helps it cover the canvas much better. So now it's a little bit more thicker, you see. Let's just get our sun, the point of our sun, right in there. And you can't really see the sun, it's just a big bright spot in the sky, really, isn't it? I'm just going to pop that little section in there, like that, getting that ready. Then I'm going to take some cadmium yellow and some white. And I'm slowly then thickening the colour, you see. and I'm mixing on the canvas. Now, more white again. And we go right in and get that nice and bright in the centre. Don't worry about making this absolutely perfect, okay? You don't need to get this perfect first time round. Now, I'm just going to take more cadmium yellow on my palette, because even though it's just a small spot, we do tend to go through a lot of cadmium yellow. Let's just pop a little cadmium yellow in there. Just give that a bit more vibrancy. I'm just using tiny amounts on my brush. Okay, that's all. I'm going to leave the very white section until the very end. Now I'm just giving this a rub on some tissue. Get that colour off, just most of the colour, look. And let's start softening outwards from this side and that side. And let's get these lovely warm colours in. Let's go to cadmium yellow, a little burnt sienna. And for me, this really is kind of trial and error. I'm trying, and a little touch of magenta just to add a little touch of warmth into that. I have a lovely thick creamy colour, look, a pasty colour. I'll start with that. I'll work that in around that yellow. I don't want to go too far into the yellow because I'll pick up the yellow and that will kind of make the colour more yellowy, and I don't want that. So just this kind of soft, warm, sunny colour. I'm leaving this, we have a nice kind of a mauvey blue up there, and I'll start going into more magenta as I come across, and a little touch of sienna. I'll start softening that colour as I come across, you see, just nice and soft. Soften it across by the yellow, just nice and gently, soften it out. I'll add a touch of that over here as well. Again, just bring it in nice and gently by the yellow, not too much. Go along the bottom. Now, we're getting the background colours in. What I generally tend to do with a sky like this is, first of all, I try to imagine there's no clouds in the sky. So I try to take the clouds out of the sky completely, just for a few minutes, and I focus on the colours behind the clouds. So I'm focusing on all those colours behind the clouds, those kind of soft colours and a bit of blue up on top. I focus on those first, then I put my clouds in last. That generally works for me. It may not work for you, but that's how I kind of work my paintings. Now, I'm going to go for a nice soft mauve up there. I'm going to take a little magenta and a tiny touch of blue, tiniest touch. You see how strong that blue is? It's so strong. Tiniest touch goes a long way. Then some white. Let's just try this first. And that's not bad. Let's mix a little more. Magenta, tiny touch of blue, and some white. I'm going for a nice soft mauve. And with a sunset like this, the trick I find is put plenty of pink in the mix first. So I'm using plenty of pink, magenta or crimson, whatever you have. And what that does is, it stops any chance of the colours mixing and going green. So if you have any colour with blue, and I'm mixing it into a yellow or an orange, it's going to go very muddy and green. So I always start with more pink in my colour first, you see what I mean? And you can soften that pinky colour into the yellows, no problem at all. And they'll become nice and soft and orangey and all that kind of stuff. So it's much easier to soften a pinky hue first, and then add your kind of your bluey shade on top of the pink. So you end up then with nice fresh colours on your canvas with no muddiness, so to speak. Now I'm going to come across and do the same over here. Just little amounts. I'm using tiny amounts of paint because there's no point in mixing huge mounds of paint on our palettes because it's just going to go to waste really. Now I'm making a lovely pink up here. Alright, so a pink first, softening into the yellow. I hope you're following. See, nice and gently, soften it across into the yellow. Just with the tip of the brush, Soften it out, bring it up and down, soften it together. So we have a nice soft colour on our canvas, don't we? So far so good. Now that I have that pink up there, I'm going to just give my brush a quick clean, and then I can start adding my blue into this. And I'm sticking with a larger brush because a larger brush prevents you from going into too much detail with your painting. If I was to use a small brush like this, which most artists would, I'd be very sort of focused and zoned in on that particular area, and I'd be very careful and trying to get it perfect like this all the way along. I find a big brush, just put the colour on, leave it, and see what happens. Now, phthalo blue and some white. I'll start with that now. Look, I'm mixing it all on the pinky colour I just had. So now we can put some blue in, and we end up with nice, crisp, clean colours. I'm softening that down just through the pink very gently, hardly touching the canvas again. That'll do fine. And I might put a slightly deeper shade over on the right hand side. So I'll take some blue, some magenta, tiny bit, and a tiny touch of black. So I'm going for a slightly deeper shade of blue over here. A bit more grey in this. Soften it very gently across. I'm avoiding the yellow as much as I possibly can. Just softening it in. Now, that is not too bad. I'm going to just deepen the left hand side a little bit more. Phthalo blue, touch of magenta. Just a little bit more, look, just a tiny touch. Soften it out very gently into that pinky shade. I find just that little bit of blue up on that side, it catches the eye, doesn't it? It really does. And I'm happy enough with that. I'm going to now put this brush down and move to a different brush for some of these smaller work. So a simple number, well, it's a ½ inch, I don't know what it's at, number 8, maybe number 12 or something like that. Any old flat brush you have will do fine. I'm going to start putting in some layers. So we have some nice mauve going on down the bottom as well. So I'll just dampen that very quickly. I'm going to mix a nice mauve. Some magenta, again, into the blue here. And then, with that nice pinky, kind of a purpley colour, I'm taking some burnt umber. That gives me a beautiful kind of a browny, pinky grey hue. And I'm just going to start, just put on a bit, just see what you think. And maybe let's just start popping that in here and there. A bit more pink, I think. A little bit more pink. I'm just going to just start filling in. Do you know what? I'll take a touch of sienna as well. So I'm going for this sort of pinky, browny sort of a colour. I'm going to just pop this up. Now this is very subtle, you see what I mean? It's a really very subtle colour. You can't really see much of it, but it's going to be softened in. It's really just to add a little bit of something across the bottom of the sky. I'm going to put a little bit of that here and there. So we're now kind of moving up towards our clouds. I'm just getting ready. I'm softening all of this upwards just to get it up to the stage where we're at our clouds. I'm popping little touches of it in here and there. Now I'm going to switch brushes because this brush is a little bit tough on top. So I'm just going to go for a slightly flatter brush. Look, a little flat brush like this. Something that keeps its point. I want something that's nice and kind of, you see, something like that. I'm going to mix some sienna. And I'm going to mix a little, let's see, a little cadmium yellow perhaps. And perhaps a little touch of cadmium red. I want to go for a nice warm pinky hue. I'm then going to add into that a tiny touch of blue. Now that will go slightly muddy. All you have to do is add a little touch more magenta. And then a touch of white just to help thicken the colour up, because those colours on their own will be very translucent again. I want to be able to cover the canvas nicely. So I'm going for the sort of, it's a kind of an orangey brown colour. I'm just going to start putting in these clouds. You see the way those clouds kind of wisp along. Another one up here. And I'm really not looking too much at the reference photograph, but it's really just for my colour. I'm looking at the reference photograph only to get those shades where I want. So that kind of, you see this kind of a reddy brown pinky shade I'm putting in here now. I'm going to allow that to kind of disappear out and soften away. And I'll go down here, maybe just make this one a little bit bigger. It disappears down into the horizon, doesn't it? So we are starting our layers quite nicely. And it's really only about looking at the reference photograph and try copy your colours. One thing I will say is, as your clouds go off into the distance coming down the canvas, they become very flat. That's one thing you will notice about sunsets in particular. The clouds will always become very flat and horizontal, sort of. They're not big fluffy clouds. They tend to become nice and kind of flat. So as they come down, just make them nice and flat like that, look. So they're kind of stretched, they're squeezed and they're stretched. And at this point, what I'm going to do is pop in a splash of white just in the center. I'm going to take some crisp white, touch of cadmium yellow, and I'm just going to pop a little of that, dab it in the center like this, and then just soften it outwards. Now you can use a very tip of your brush to soften that outwards, okay, just like this. I just want to get that very luminous center in all of this. Now you could try cadmium yellow on its own as well. That will really give it a bit of a pop. Let's say around the outside we could try cadmium yellow on its own. Soften it outwards. Don't worry about your brush making little dimple effects on your canvas. We will soften this with the softener brush very soon. So it's just to get the colour on. That's all I want to do. Clean the tip of the brush again and pick up some fresh white. Now my white has little bits of blue in it, but it should be fine. Right in the centre then, soften some white outwards as well, look. And that's not bad, is it? As sunsets go, that's not a bad little sun off in the distance, is it? Now we're going into the heavy stuff, the proper clouds. So I'll stick with that brush for now. And I'm going to mix a nice plum. Let's go for a nice rich plum. Magenta and some phaylo blue. I need to get magenta. I've run out of magenta. I tend to use little amounts of paint at a time, because if I end up putting huge dollops of paint on my palette, it's just going to be left over. It's going to go hard. I'm going to scrape it off the next time, and it's just a waste of a lot of paint. So I generally use little bits as I'm going. I just find it's a lot more economical, really. It really is. Right, magenta, a little blue, I put a touch of white into this just to make it that nice thick creamy colour, you see, and then you can darken it again as you need. So more magenta, more blue, maybe a touch of burnt umber. That gives you a nice deep kind of a mauvey colour, okay? A nice warm kind of a browny mauve hue. I have more pink in this than anything else. So, a nice warm mauve. Let's start. How's that? Not bad, is it? We'll go with that for now. Scrape it along. I'm going to stop when I get to the yellow, okay? And there's a very good reason why. I'll show you in just a moment. So, we go up and we pop in these clouds. Going around in little circles, little flicks like this, look. Giving you nice little effects. Again, we go over this side. Now, because this is over by the blue sky, it will be slightly cooler in colour. So I will add a touch more blue into that side. You see that? Just a little bit more blue into the mix. And then you're kind of really letting your brush dance around just to create some nice cloud over there. Very natural looking clouds will be very random, I find, in painting. Let's pick up a bit more magenta. Tiny bit more as we're going. As we're coming across into this orangey shade, I'm going to add more and more pink. So basically, because we have a lot of blue in that mix already, a bit more pink, and maybe even a touch of cadmium red as well. As we're going, that softens into the orangey shades then much better, you see? And it keeps the colours nice and clean and fresh almost. So we're not getting any muddy shades. And we can pop a little few here and there, look, just coming off of those, just to make it random again, nice and random. Let's put one up there. And I am using very minimal paint on my brush, you see. My brush is quite dry, there's not a huge amount of paint on my brush. Now let's stop and take a look. Let's just stop for a moment, take a quick look at how we're getting on. Let's take a bit more cadmium red. Now, what I was saying earlier is add some cadmium red to your mix and then you can come from here over into the yellow, you see. So you have cadmium red and you're going into the yellow. That stops it from going nice and muddy and green, doesn't it? It gives you that nice warm effect coming into the yellow. And we can even cross right through our sun as well, look. And I'm just being very random with my cloud. The next thing I'm going to do is start darkening. That's my next stage. I'm going to start darkening these right down. I'm going to go with burnt umber, magenta, and a touch of black. Tiny touch of black. I have a very blacky pink colour now going on here. You see up here, there's a nice dark, isn't there? I'm just going to get that in. Just ever so gently, I'm taking my time with all of this. Soften it away. We could even add a couple of hints of that colour along the bottom as well. Just for a bit of interest, really, nothing else. Let's take a bit more pink in that. Then a touch of blue, tiny touch of blue. I'm just looking at where the dark shades are on the sky. Okay, that's really all I'm doing. Now we do have one final colour, and it's a sort of a blue with a black. It's a very deep colour over there, just on the right hand side. Blue, black and magenta. And I'm going to pop that in here, you see, look at that. Nice, rich, dark colours. Take some more magenta. Just remember, as you're coming into those yellows, add plenty of pink or red into your mix. And that allows them to just soften through nicely. Now, let's bring it down. Maybe a little bit down here, just to follow the colour down ever so slightly. Because you don't want just a big blob of dark colour. You want to kind of carry it down slightly. I find that works. Now, let's take a touch more blue into that. And I'm looking over on the left-hand side. We have some nice darks. We need a bit of contrast in this, don't we? Because the colours tend to soften away. Especially with oils. The colours tend to soften away back into the background. So put on thick colour, and then that will soften. That will soften in, but it will still hold its value a little bit. Let's take some more magenta now in this, a lot more pink. See, and we can add a bit more pink as we come across then into the darks, you see, and into those warmer colours. A bit more pink makes all the difference. So we're going for a nice colourful kind of a landscape. Nice colourful sky. Okay, I'm cleaning that brush and I'm going to put in a very rich kind of a blue. So I'll take some blue and then a little bit of white. This very kind of a vibrant, maybe a touch of magenta as well actually, look. Tiny touch of magenta. There's a very vibrant kind of a colour up here, softening through this. Bit more magenta, I'm thinking. And you can see I'm playing around with it really, just having a bit of fun. I'm not being too particular with any of this. Maybe pop a little bit up here as well. Just again, to carry the colours across the canvas, that's all. Now I'm going to stop and I'm going to soften. So, blender brushes at the ready, everyone. Let's start in the centre. Keep those yellows nice and crisp, and then go outwards and soften those colours together. I'm starting at the bottom where it's lightest, just to keep my brush clean. And give it a little flick upwards and downwards here and there. That just gives you a nice natural kind of a flick of the clouds. And then I start going into the darks and start softening all those together. Very sort of loosely. I mean very, very loose now with all of this. Then come over and we start flicking down on these. And there's a very good reason why you're flicking in certain directions with painting clouds like this. You're drawing the eye into the centre of the painting with the clouds. So you want the clouds kind of flick downwards and maybe inwards slightly to the centre of your painting. Let's just give my brush a quick rub here now, and then from this side, you see, we can flick this across. And the beauty about the blender brush is you can go as hard or as soft as you want, depending on what you want in your sky. Now let's stop at that and take a look. And that's not a bad looking sky, is it? All we have left to do is some nice lights, some nice bright highlights here and there. So I'm cleaning my small flat brush again. Give it a good clean, get all that orangey colour out of the brush. Now we're moving on to some nice bright bright colours. Let me see, what do I need? I need some titanium white, don't I? And I'm also going to give a little bit of a flick up here as well to show some sun rays. I think that would add a bit of interest to the sky, don't you? But first, I need to take a sup of coffee. You can't have a painting without some coffee, can you? Right, a little flick. Let's see. I'm going to get a clean brush. A nice little flat clean brush. Anything at all will do, you want just nice and flat, okay? Let's take a bit of white. Touch of that yellow. And let's just go for it. Let's give it a flick up. A little bit more white in there, perhaps. Now we will put some clouds in front of this again. Just with a dry brush, a bit of paint. Nothing too fancy. I don't want to go too complicated with all of this. Now I'm just going to go back into some nice pinky colour, nice warm colour. Anything with a bit of pink in it will do fine. And let's just pop a couple in front of those rays, because remember, those rays are way off up in the atmosphere, very far away. You don't want them coming across in front of clouds, because it may look a bit funny, wouldn't it? So look, just put one or two across in front of the rays of sun, and we'll just soften these back in. So my soft blender brush is getting a little on the messy side, so I'm being very careful now. Very careful. There we go. Just a little bit of a kind of a ray going up is nice, I think. Right, onto our bright highlights. Some cadmium yellow, some white, a little touch of cadmium red in there as well. It's a very bright pasty colour. I'm simply going, let me just add a bit more to this now, just a touch more cadmium yellow, touch more cadmium red. Let's go for some nice bright highlights in under these. Look, just with the corner of the brush, I'm simply going to go along and pop some of these in here and there, just along the edges of some of those warmer colours, you see, because the sun is going to be coming down and hitting around the edges of those clouds, like so. I can put a few across here as well. And slowly, bit by bit, the painting is coming to life, isn't it? Now here as well, there's a lot of lights just kind of hitting the back end of this, just down at the bottom. We can soften those in a moment. Just keep cleaning your brush in between, just to keep it nice and fresh. Up here, a lot of nice highlights going on. It's all these little highlights which brings a sunset to life, I think. All of these lovely little highlights. Now let's go over here and add a few around those. You see, I'm being very careful over here now because we have a bluey plummy colour there, and we don't want any messy colours, do we? So I'm being very careful on that side. Slightly more orange, perhaps. Just a bit. Now I'm going to mix a deep orange. And it's just for under here. I just feel it needs a little bit of richening, doesn't it? A little bit richer. And I could even come across over here and add a little bit of that here and there as well. More cadmium red, more cadmium yellow. And look, just take your time with all of this. There's no rush. You know, you don't have to go rushing to get it all done as fast as this. I'm just used to painting like this. I really am. It's just something that I've become accustomed to. So you take your time. There's no rush. Okay, I'm going to add some highlights just over here as well. What I'm going to do, actually, clean my brush just for a moment. I'm going to mix a bright pink for the highlights over here. So let's go with some magenta and some white. I think a light pink will be just nice on those highlights. Because you are going into a blue. So if I put a yellowy highlight over these, it's going to go green almost immediately. So I just need to be very careful. You don't want green on your sunset. Some sunsets do have a bit of green going through them, but in general, I think just to be cautious, a little bit of pink just over there. Let's mix a bit more now, pop a little bit more in. Let's not be shy. Let's just have a bit of fun with all of this. Then I'm going to take another soft brush. I'm just going to give this a clean on some tissue because I don't want to be contaminating the rest of my painting. So I'm giving this a good clean first before I start softening colours together. I'm going to go in here and start softening all of this. Getting it nice and soft. Now you will probably notice your colours may start to go slightly muddy now and then. But you can put more on afterwards if you like. Absolutely. Over into these. Let's just pull these. And you can use a smaller blender brush if you like. Give you more accuracy. See, I made a small mistake there now. Look, a little bit of blue. I'm just going to soften that up with my brush. Now I'm going to stand back and take a look at that. And that is not half bad, is it? It's not bad. Just for a 30-minute sky, I don't think it's that bad. Now I'm going to a smaller brush, small pointy brush for some final highlights. I'm going to go over here. I'm just going to pop some final shapes and a little more kind of detailed shapes as well. It's really just a couple of wiggles with my brush, just here and there around some of those clouds. I'm not trying to be absolutely perfect with all of this, but just a couple of bright highlights. Here and there. I think it just finishes off the painting quite nicely, doesn't it? And there we go. And I think for my very final piece, I'm just going to add a bit more white right into the center of that. Just to brighten it back up again. You know, with paintings like this, it's very difficult to know when to stop, when enough is enough. That's probably the most trickiest part, but I'm quite happy with that. I have to say now, I'm quite happy with that. I'm just going to take any random old brush at all, anything at all, nice little brush here. I'm just going to soften some of these very gently with my brush, just back into some of the clouds. Look, just take the kind of the hard edges off of some of them. That's all, nice and soft, look. And how's that? And my friends, I think that's quite a nice painting of a sky, I have to say. I'm thinking I might just add a little more yellow into the sky, just down here, just some cadmium yellow. I just picked up some cadmium yellow, look, with my brush, and I'm just popping a little more of that just through here and there. Add a bit more of that sun into the sky, that rich yellow. Just soften it outwards from the center out, that's all. And perhaps a little touch of orange, cadmium yellow, cadmium red, make a nice rich deep orange, and we could add some of that as well, just along here and there. I'll stop at that, and I'm going to peel off my masking tape to see. Let me just soften some of these back in here. I'll peel off the masking tape and see what it looks like. There, that gives you a better picture, doesn't it? A nice little sunset sky, and we've taken our time, you know, and look, as you can see, I didn't go into a huge amount of detail. I just kept it simple, so you have an idea now of how to create a nice kind of a simple sunset sky. I think that's part one finished, my friends. Let me just turn the camera here. Let me just take off the exposure first, turn the camera, and that's part one finished. I'll be back again very shortly with part two, the ocean. Nice, again, nice and simple, a little touch of detail here and there towards the end, but I hope you've enjoyed it, and give it a try. Let me know what you think, and I'll be right back. Happy painting!